It was no Christian McCaffery, no problem for Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers on Monday Night Football. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the new Locked On NFL, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Keith Sanchez, one of our Locked On NFL experts. On today's show, we're going to talk about CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson. Are they the best two young quarterbacks in the NFL? There are two teams that are 0-1, the Packers and the Ravens, and I think they're going opposite directions. And of course, we had a good game on Monday Night Football where the 49ers take down the Jets 32-19. Before we dive in, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. Make sure that you tune in later in the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some other Locked On NFL action. But this Monday Night Football game, listen, I said it out of the gate here, Keith. No McCaffrey, no problem. But is there a problem that there was no McCaffrey? Let's hear from our guys at Locked On 49ers.
Unbelievable news that Christian McCaffrey was inactive. Were the San Francisco 49ers playing a little funny business with that information, Croc? Because on the radio this week, especially John Lynch made it sound like, man, Christian McCaffrey is playing. Christian McCaffrey himself made it sound like Christian McCaffrey is playing. And I don't know if you caught this, Croc, but after the game, they asked Jordan Mason when he found out he was going to be starting, and he said, Friday.
Well, Friday was the day that Christian McCaffrey pulled himself out of practice.
Yeah.
So that was something that we didn't know. And if you listen to John Lynch prior to, Friday afternoon's practice, it was something that a lot of people weren't privileged to. I think the 49ers assumed, oh, yeah, Christian McCaffrey, Monday evening, he's going to be just fine.
Well, he wasn't just fine, and he didn't play. And Keith, here's what I got to say. There are a lot of people out there wondering, like, hey, is there something against the rules that was done? With the gambling aspect of the game nowadays, you got to be upfront and honest about injury stuff, or people think that you're trying to do certain things. Look, I think that the 49ers probably never had intentions of playing Christian McCaffrey. He's had the calf injury that he's dealing with. They probably knew that throughout the week. But pulling him out of practice on Friday, hey, we gave you an injury report for Friday's practice. I mean, he got hurt in Friday's practice, so it's not like we could have told you way before Jordan Mason's story lines up. And a lot of these situations, it's all about making sure that your story lines up here, okay? And Jordan Mason saying, oh, I didn't know until Friday. It was Friday. They talk, I don't think the 49ers are going to get in trouble for anything here personally.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. And I want to preface this, right? If you're the New York Jets, right, because this is an issue, did it matter, right? It's one thing if they said that Christian McCaffrey was hurt, right, and then he ended up playing out of nowhere. But if you're the New York Jets, you sitting at home like, kind of glad we didn't face Christian McCaffrey because it'd have probably been worse at the end of the day, right? Yes. You couldn't beat Jordan Mason. So what makes you think you had a better chance with Christian McCaffrey, especially everything that Kyle Shanahan does with Christian McCaffrey, right? It just been more. We're talking about what I think that was Kyle's Juszczyk, right? Running the wheel routes. He was wide open. Now just imagine if that was Christian McCaffrey, right? That's probably 2-3 touchdowns in that situation. So I understand probably from the gambling and sports betting perspective, right? Obviously you need to know those type of situations, but if we're talking about some type of competitive imbalance, they played the backup and still beat you by double digits, right? So if you're the New York Jets, you're sitting there and you're just like, you know what? It doesn't matter. We lost regardless.
Yeah, and speaking of the backup, Jordan Mason, what a coming out party. 28 carries, 147 yards, 5.3 yards per carry, had the touchdown as well. An incredible performance from Jordan Mason is a household name. You do something like that on Monday Night Football. That's what dreams are made of right there. But I think it just is another feather in Kyle Shanahan's cap.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
just another one of those moments, another one of those, it's like Moana where the Rock's character gets the tattoos on his body. It's just another tattoo on Kyle Shanahan's body right there, just to say like, hey, we didn't have Christian McCaffery and we still ran it down. I mean, you look at the overall rushing numbers. San Francisco ran for like 180 yards while the Jets only ran for 68. This stood out to me. 10 total drives for both teams. But San Francisco had 10 more first downs, 24 compared to 14 for the Jets. The Jets were just not able to run the football with any success against San Francisco. Only 68 rushing yards, 3.6 on the night. So they had some good moments, with Garrett Wilson hooking up. They hit a few little plays to Breece Hall here and there. Obviously, Alan Lazard catches the big touchdown pass, but the Jets were not able to run the ball with consistency. And on the other side, San Francisco just absolutely ran the ball down their throat.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And you know what this brought up for me? I have this question. Is the Jets defense actually as good as we thought they are, or we think they are? And the reason why, I'm going to flip this on his head, right, is that what people understand is complementary football, right? And complementary goes both ways in the sense of the fact of this, that if I know I have a bad offense, sometimes the defense benefits that is because I'm going to run the football, I'm going to play ball control, right? And I'm going to bleed the clock. But when I have a high-powered offense, right, or perceived high-powered offense like Aaron Rodgers, what are you getting? You're getting clock stoppage, right? Because Aaron Rodgers is dropping back 20, 30, 40 times a game, so he's stopping the clock, right? And then also, even if you have a high-powered offense, if they're going up and down the field scoring, now your defense is back on the field, right? So we have to, and I don't know the statistics. I'm more than sure somebody's going to tweet at me. I would love to know them, right? Just about the statistics of snaps played, right? And then how much they've actually been on the field, and then how the complementary football and them not having a great quarterback actually probably benefited them in sometimes because they didn't have to worry about getting shootouts because it wasn't baked into their game plan.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, that it changes the dynamic when you have a player like Rodgers in more ways than one. It's not just off the field, it's on the field. It makes their team totally different in the way that they played last year with their quarterback situation. And it may be better to have Rodgers, but I get what you're saying. It's a different flow to the game for a defense and what they can expect. And that's probably something that they got to adjust to. All I know is that you're right. The Jets defense is supposed to be one of these really, really good defenses. And you look last year, yards per carry, they were high or not high, but top 12, top 14, I think it was. But the Jets were not some fantastic run defense last year. That was an area where they were a little bit susceptible if you had to attack them. So I think looking forward, if they're not going to hold the ball and they're going to get it run down their throat, which keeps the defense out on the field, it's going to make it awfully difficult for the Jets to be the defensive team that they're hoping that they can be. But with that being said, what a great Monday night football game. We're going to have more reaction to that and some of the biggest news in the NFL getting hit later on today in the barbershop with Tony Wiggins, the OG Tony Wiggins, man. You guys got to tune in for that. Make sure that you don't miss it. Men, when we leave the house, it's phone, wallet, keys, and how's my hair look? But if you're experiencing hair loss, you may not be so confident when you step outside your door. It's time to get that confidence back and restore your hair with Hims. Hims provides access to a range of hair loss treatments that work, all from the comfort of your couch. They offer personalized, chewable, oral, spray, and serum treatment options so you can find what works best for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/LockedOnNFL. That's HIMS.com/LockedOnNFL for your personalized hair loss treatment options. HIMS.com/LockedOnNFL. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. So transitioning away from a fun Monday night football game, even if it wasn't competitive all the way until the end, transitioning away, we got to talk about some teams that did not win in week one, but still seem like they're going to have a chance to be contenders. And we got to start with the Green Bay Packers. So on Monday, Matt LaFleur announced that Malik Willis would be the starter for the Green Bay Packers if Jordan Love couldn't go. And that's been a conversation, obviously, since Jordan Love got hurt on Friday night in Brazil. We're going to hear from Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers on that situation.
After Packer fans held their breath all day Saturday, we got word on the Jordan Love injury. It is an MCL, and we still don't know exactly what the timeline is going to be. 3 to 6 weeks is the early word, with reports that the Packers believe Jordan Love could come back in the earlier time frame of that window. 3 weeks would be Minnesota Vikings in week 4. Could Jordan Love practice that week? Could he not? That is still to be determined. The question now for the Packers is, do they have the right quarterbacks in this room, whether it's Malik Willis as QB2 or Sean Clifford on the practice squad, to get them to where they want to go over the next month or so? Can they right the ship a little bit? Can they play 500 football over the next 4 games if they have to give Love a shot with a 500 team to then go make a playoff push? My answer to that question is no. They need to go get someone like Ryan Tannehill. Will the Packers agree? Do you agree? Let me know.
Well, it looks like the Packers don't agree. And I got to tell you, Keith, I think it's a big mistake. I think the Packers have really botched their backup quarterback situation here. And I would say 3 strikes and you're out. They have Sean Clifford. They don't like Sean Clifford. They try to get somebody new. They draft Michael Pratt. Well, Michael Pratt is so bad that they cut him from the roster, and they cut Sean Clifford too because he's so bad, and they trade for Malik Willis. And look, Malik Willis has a lot of talent, but I've watched Malik Willis personally for the last 2 years, and asking him to go into a game and actually win you an NFL game, or 3 weeks worth of games, or 4 weeks worth of games, or to keep this Green Bay Packers thing afloat after they go 0-1, Malik Willis, I do not believe is capable of that. So to me, Sean Clifford, Michael Pratt, Malik Willis, 3 strikes, you are out, Green Bay Packers. Quit trying to believe that you have the answers. They need to go get Ryan Tannehill if they want to keep this thing afloat. Now, I don't think that Ryan Tannehill would want them, because Tannehill is going to want something more long-term than 4 to 6 weeks, and then Jordan Love's back, and then what? I'm the backup in Green Bay when I could be with my family in the Bahamas? Not a chance. So I think that they missed a chance to get a Gardner Minshew or a better backup. They could have got a Joe Flacco as a backup for them. There were other options, even Mason Rudolph in Tennessee, who the Titans kept over Malik Willis, I think would be a better quarterback for this situation the Packers are in right now, needing to just stem the tide and maybe get 2 wins in 4 weeks so Jordan Love can get back. I don't believe that they're in a situation where they can get those wins right now. And again, 3 strikes and you're out. Green Bay had 3 chances at fixing the backup spot, and they blew them all. And now I think they might be too far behind in the NFC. They're 0-1. Talk about, can they come back? I don't think Green Bay will be able to come back after the losses they sustained before Love comes back.
Well, yeah, I think this part is true, that they botched the backup quarterback situation, right? But is their season done? I would have to say no. And the reason is this, that they've spent a lot of draft capital over the past few years, on that defense, right? And we know one thing, that defense and run game can get you out of a couple games, right? You get there, you punch a couple teams in the mouth, you can squeak out a 17-15 type game, right? You know who they need to ask? The Chicago Bears, right? I think they had 150 yards total offense, and they walked out of there with the win. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that part of it, right? So I think that's the part. And I think this, Malik Willis, you activate his legs, right? You don't ask him to do things that he cannot do. And one benefit is that there's not a lot of game film out there for him. And to address the Ryan Tannehill part, I'll say this: beggars can't be choosy, right? It's not like Ryan Tannehill is necessarily Tom Brady or Peyton Manning, where we're calling him out of the Fox, sportscasting box. Peyton Manning, he's with Bill Belichick breaking down film on ESPN. It's like, look, you still have an opportunity to kind of lay your legacy, right? And who knows if Jordan Love's situation is going to be 3 weeks or 6 weeks, or who knows, and I hate to wish this on him, right? But there are also possible re-injuries, right? Because anytime you talk about an ACL, MCL, PCL, any CL, I'm kind of out, right? I'm a little bit nervous about that. So I'll lean on the side of this. I agree with you 100% that the Packers botched this situation. They said we were going to pay our young quarterback, and they were full gas right on Jordan Love. But you cannot do that. This is football. You live down in and down out. So they should have addressed the backup situation. But Matt LaFleur, the general manager, ownership over there, they have a little bit of wiggle room where they can figure this thing out.
Yeah, well, Green Bay, that's the thing. You can't really hammer Green Bay on much because they get pretty much all of it right. But I just don't think that they got this one particularly right. One thing I will say for Malik Willis, I talked to Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers about this.
Yep.
The next 2 games for the Packers are the Colts and then the Titans. Well, if Malik Willis knows 2 teams in the NFL, he knows the Colts and the Titans. So there's at least that for the Packers. But a team I actually believe is still a contender despite losing in week 1 is the Baltimore Ravens, and I am not the only one who believes it. Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens has something to say.
The AFC North. Right, the Ravens lose to Kansas City in week 1, 27-20, opening night of the season. Does not mean the AFC North does not still belong to the Baltimore Ravens. It absolutely does, and that's how people should be thinking right now, because after what we saw yesterday, Pittsburgh Steelers, Cincinnati Bengals, Cleveland Browns, there's still no doubt in my mind that I personally believe the Ravens are in a pretty good spot to win this division. And right now they're not in the lead. Pittsburgh did beat Atlanta yesterday, so they are technically in the division lead. So it's Pittsburgh 1-0, and then Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Cleveland 0-1. But out of all the performances we saw, I'm still the most confident in Baltimore winning the division, and it's not particularly close.
I agree with Kevin. I think that the Ravens played better football while losing to the Chiefs than the Steelers did while winning over the Falcons. The Steelers kicked, 6 field goals? It was 18-10. They kicked 6 field goals. That was just a classic Steelers game of we're dragging you down in the mud. We're bringing you into the phone booth and we're boxing with you and you're not getting out of our grasp. I mean, maybe I'm stepping out of line here, Keith, but I don't know anybody who would say right now, despite the 1-0 for the Steelers, the 0-1 for the Ravens, that they believe in the Steelers more than the Ravens. I think that the real story is the Bengals and the Browns, who both were expected to be competitive teams, look completely out of sorts, and they're probably going to turn that around and play better football. But the Ravens didn't lose a lot of ground here, especially losing to the Chiefs, who are going to beat a lot of teams this year anyway. Like, I still fully believe that the Ravens are winning that division. Do you disagree?
No, I do not disagree. I agree with you, right? I mean, we're right on par with this. The AFC North is for the Ravens to take, and we've seen this, right? We watched the Cleveland Browns, and we sat there and we watched them and said, you know what? This was about on par, right? For the Cleveland Browns, what we expected with the situation with Deshaun Watson, right? Then you know what caught us off guard was the Cincinnati Bengals, right? And you talk about post-game, some of the comments, some of the things that were said, it just looked out of sorts. And you wonder if all of the training camp stuff is starting to bleed into the regular season, right? And people wonder why training camp and preseason matters. It's so you don't go up to New England and lose that football game. And that's a big time game, right? So I'm with you. I think the Baltimore Ravens are in a prime situation. Do they have to figure out this passing attack? Should they be on the market trying to find some veteran free agent that's at home to add to this wide receiver room? Of course, but guess what? They can run the football. Lamar Jackson can will them to 11 wins by himself.
100. Hey, Locked On bosses, the shadowy bosses at Locked On. We're bringing Keith on more often. I got agreement on the Packers backup. I got full agreement on the Ravens. I got full agreement on the Bengals, who I just bashed yesterday for having the disease of me with all the contract stuff. We're bringing Keith on more often, folks, but we got a lot more to talk about, and Keith is the perfect guy to talk about it. Young quarterbacks in the NFL, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. Would you take anybody over those guys? We're going to dive into that. Before we do want to thank you again for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. Make sure that you tune back in for the afternoon version of Locked On NFL with none other than the GOAT himself, Tony Wiggins, the barber. Step into the barbershop and chop it up on some real NFL talk. Can't wait for this Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud discussion. Before we get into it, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, and of course, it's America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Listen, might be a little home cooking for me, but the Titans are 4-point underdogs at home against the Jets. I'm just saying, after watching the Jets get the ball run down their throat, I'm just saying, hey, Keith, I'm just saying a couple of things out loud. All I really know, though, is that you guys got to visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook today. All right, football fans, we're going to cap off this edition of Locked On NFL, talking about some young quarterbacks who both looked pretty good in their debut. Although 1 won and 1 loss, it was still a pretty good showing from the two young guys. Before we get into it, again, want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen. Check out Tony Wiggins in the barbershop later on this afternoon. Going to be talking more Monday Night Football. We're talking about a lot of great NFL topics. It's good to have football back. But Keith, what a great game between the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts. It was an absolute barn burner, which is actually kind of what I was expecting. It was a pretty high over-under total on FanDuel Sportsbook as well. So I guess we shouldn't be shocked about it, but a very entertaining game. The Texans win 29-27. CJ Stroud shows out with 234 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Anthony Richardson, despite not having a lot of completions in this game, only completed 9 passes, went for 212 yards, had that insane 60-yard bomb for a touchdown, 2 touchdowns, ran a touchdown in. I guess looking at this, is there a single quarterback that you would take in the NFL the year after Stroud and AR, the year before, any college quarterbacks that you would take over these two guys? I can tell you that John Hickman and Cody Davis at Locked On Texans, they ain't taking anybody over CJ Stroud.
Bringing it back to CJ Stroud and how he had to, face that adversity, succeed against that adversity with the pressure that they allow. Like Bobby said, sometimes he got it right. Both Diggs touchdown calls, I think, were perfect calls. Scheming up, number 1 to get open, scoring for Houston. The play calling when he got it wrong. I look at the across the body throw across the field on 3rd and 9, I believe, to Nico Collins to help extend that drive. So, like, when you look at getting it wrong and CJ still allowing you to get it right, gain of 6. In that case, it was a gain of either 9 or 10, picking up that first down for Nico Collins. You see the growth there from CJ Stroud.
One thing for me, as someone who covers Will Levis, that I noticed, number 1, about CJ Stroud is the poise that he plays with. But Keith, we asked the question, time to answer the question. Out of this kind of generation of young quarterbacks the last few years and maybe the years coming up, is there anybody you're taking over CJ Stroud, and where does Anthony Richardson fall in that situation?
Yeah, we talk about young quarterbacks, and I guess we'll keep it in context, right, of probably the last 3 years and maybe looking ahead, right? And the answer is simply no, because what CJ Stroud has is not just the physical tools, right? It's the mental part of it. It's being cool, calm, and collective. And to the listeners, so I coached at LSU as a part of that coaching staff with Joe Burrow, right? And one thing I'll tell you, that Joe Burrow was not going to wow you with his arm, but what he was going to wow you with was the toughness, the integrity that he played with, the mental part of it. Like you said, it's just all of that encompassed into one, and that's what makes a winning quarterback, right? Tom Brady went in the 6th round. I guarantee you, if he ran a 4.3 and had a rocket launcher for an arm, he wouldn't have won in the 6th round, right? But he had somewhat, would you say, average to good measurables and traits, but guess what? Mentally, he had it all. And that's the same thing I see with CJ Stroud. I'm going to pivot to Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson, listen, if you're a Colts fan, you technically lost, but you won yesterday because you feel good and you feel like, you know what, I have a franchise quarterback. And I love the way that the head coach is using him coming over from Philadelphia, right? And now he's able to implement Anthony Richardson, allow him to use his legs, get that big 240-pound frame moving forward, right? Make defenders scared to tackle him. And then what is he good at? throwing the deep ball. So that's how you find the balance. He doesn't necessarily have to hit the quick slants and the deep digs and things like that, because his legs allow him to draw the defense down, to force you into a one-high situation, and then he can throw the football over the top. So if you ask me, I'm probably saying no. And I'm a guy that I like to see proven commodities at the end of the day. I'm not betting on guys that's unproven. So I'm rocking with these two guys because they showed us week one. They came out, it was a heavyweight fight. And it's just that CJ Stroud had the last punch.
Yeah, a couple of things on Anthony Richardson. I mean, I'm a big CJ Stroud fan, obviously, and I think that when he floats out of the pocket to the right and dumps it off to Nico Collins, the play that John's talking about where it's 3rd and 9 and he gets the 10, like that's not about talent. That's just savvy. That's pocket awareness. That's natural instinct. And as someone who's also a Buckeyes fan, there is nobody I saw in the last few years that we're talking about here who's just more of a pure quarterback, like was born to do it, than CJ Stroud. It's just in his instinct to play the position that way. Anthony Richardson may not have quite that instinct and that just natural feel to him, but you talk about coming over from Philadelphia with Jalen Hurts and trying to put Anthony Richardson that. Anthony Richardson looks like Jalen Hurts got the Captain America super soldier serum. Like he's like Jalen Hurts, but on steroids. You know what I mean? And his ability to run eliminates that down-to-down accuracy concern a little bit. You know, he, like you said, he may not hit the slant. He may not be pinpoint accurate on the quick stuff, but he's going to be able to run, and that's going to keep the chains moving. That's going to be able to keep you on a healthy diet. So I'm really impressed by those two, even though, again, Stroud won, Richardson lost. You got to give a lot of credit there. And speaking of Captain America, our guys at Locked On Colts described Anthony Richardson in a pretty great way.
But Ben, we're here to talk about Anthony Richardson's again, video game performance, I think, is the best way to say this, where Richardson has this ADOT of 16 in this game, currently leads the NFL in yards per attempt with 11.2, which is like Matt Ryan MVP yards per attempt. His EPA per play is like 6 in the NFL right now. Like everything looks great on 9 completions. Completions.
It's honestly, if you go look at the box score and you never saw the game, it makes no sense. It literally makes no sense. I think it was like 170 yards on 2 throws. And when you go actually watch the film, it starts to add a lot more context to this like ridiculous stat sheet that doesn't make sense. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the box score, you can pick some really good things out of what you saw from Anthony Richardson yesterday.
You know what this whole conversation has me thinking? It may be diabolical. It may be crazy, but I am the madman, Keith. Does the AFC South have the best quarterbacks of any division? Trevor Lawrence lost, but he made some good throws in that game. Some people love Trevor Lawrence, some people hate Trevor Lawrence, so it's either one or the other. You either believe or you don't. I'm not a believer, but hey, you know, I've got my biases. But is the AFC South up there best quarterbacks?
I was ready to say that. And walking into week 1, I felt like that. In halftime of the Titans-Bear game, I felt like that. And then there was a second half that was played in that game, which kind of holds it back a little bit. I may still give that to the AFC North, right? And I know we talked about it at the beginning, right? But I'm still going to bet on Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, that upside, right? And then somebody figuring it out with Pittsburgh, the Deshaun Watson situation.
Jameis Winston. Play Winston. God. Anyway, but all right, great stuff, man. Football's back. It feels so good. Keith, thank you so much for joining us here. We'll have Lauren back soon, though. But it was, hey, remember, more Keith Sanchez. I like this. Been agreement here on the back half of the show. But Monday Night Football, Packers, Ravens, Stroud, Richardson. Football is back, folks. That's going to do it for us. Make sure that you tune back in to our episode this afternoon with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop. I am the madman, Tyler Rowland, with my co-host, Keith Sanchez. As I tell you guys, stay safe out there, and we'll be back to football before we know it.